they're kept cool all the way.
Fostex beef stew to keep your men going strong. Here is your evening meal ready for the market. And from these steers will come roasts and steaks, juicy and tender. But you'll pay for them not just any price, but a ceiling price which is fair to both buyer and seller.
Well, here's a question for you. What do Formula One ace Lewis Hamilton, tennis star Venus Williams, former US President Bill Clinton, and the singer Erykah Budd all have in common? Well, they've embraced veganism.
It looks like meat, tastes like meat, yes, even bleeds like meat.
The stock market debut for Beyond Meat went beyond.
Who they're appealing to is a generation of people who are appalled by meat, and they embrace the notion that it's a young person's game.
So should we all be going vegan?
Hi, I'm Brian Sanders, and I'm making a film about the guy who pretended he was making a film about discovering the plant-based diet. A lot of my crew tried plant-based diets for many years and ruined their health. And now they're eating more animal foods than ever and performing at their best. There's no one-size-fits-all diet, but some diets don't fit anyone. We're gonna base this on science and not ideology. Let's do this.
I spent more than 1,000 hours studying peer-reviewed science on recovery and nutrition.
All right, well, after your 1,000 hours of research, maybe you should have fact-checked things and not made such a biased film. It's been debunked countless times already. And we even have a very popular vegan YouTuber who does a debunk of her own.
It's hard to trust people who continually leave out information like this. You know, it makes it seem like they have a narrative and they're going to promote that narrative at all costs.
That's when I stumbled across a study about the Roman gladiators.
Archaeologists recovered the remains of at least 68 gladiators. We found in the cross-section of the bone very high bone mineral density, which indicated intense training and high-quality diet to build up strong muscles and strong bones. This diet gave the gladiators the nickname hordeari, which means beans and barley muncher.
Can we just back up to history for a second, the Roman Empire? Gladiators are slaves. They are a commodity. They are called hordeari, barley men, as a put down. It's derogatory. And also, the gladiators were fat.
In the movie, they talk about the gladiators and how the gladiators were fed grains, and they try to exalt grains, saying that these were protected or good for the gladiators. When in fact, if you read the anthropologic literature, the gladiators were fed slave food because they were often enslaved, and what the gladiators knew was that the fatter their abdominal region was, the more their organs would be protected and they would bleed less when they got cuts. And when you're getting hit with a sword, having extra fat is a good thing. When you're trying to do anything else in life, having a bunch of fat is not a good thing. So maybe beneficial in a survival situation where you're getting hit by a sword or when you want to push somebody out of a sumo ring. But clearly, this is not evidence that grains create strong warriors. It's evidence that gladiators were using the grains fed to them as slave food to protect themselves from mortal injury.
And this is the unfortunate thing that we see in America. Socioeconomically, the poorest people are the most obese. Like, there's places in the world where you go and the poorest people are thin, are skinny, are starving. That's not the case here because poor people can go in and get lots of cheap carbs. And that's what makes us obese. It's entirely obvious. The problem is not the meat, it's clearly the processed carbohydrates that taste way too good and we eat way too much of.
It doesn't hurt much, and it looks great for spectators. I wonder why they didn't mention that in the movie. Again, it's such a stupid thing to even bring up in the first place. It doesn't mean anything other than, yeah, you can get fat if you eat a crap ton of carbs.
We know different food sources give different amounts of strontium in the bones. High strontium levels in vegetarians, low strontium levels in carnivores. If there is low strontium in the sample, the flame will stay blue. If there is high strontium levels, it will change from blue to red. The gladiators were predominantly vegetarian.
If we look at skeletal remains of hunter-gatherers versus farmers, we see a similar pattern where we see incredible bone density. In fact, they were taller, they had higher quality bone, higher quality teeth, and they had larger brains. And this was due to high quality animal products in the diet. And when we made the switch to a grain-based diet, we lost all of that. We lost our bone density.
You would go to a pre-game dinner with the football team and you would see this spread. There would be steak and chicken, very much protein-oriented because their perception was that the protein is what sustains their energy.
So here the coach is talking about the mistakes the athletes are making, thinking about protein as an energy substrate. In some ways, the athletes are not making a mistake because they're using this large amount of protein for repair and rebuilding of their muscles, and they're usually using animal-based protein. But he is trying to say that they don't need protein for energy, that they need fat or carbohydrate, which in some ways is true. However, the protein that they're getting from animals is much more bioavailable than the protein they would get from plants.
If you tell individuals to reduce their high-quality protein, namely animal sources, for plant-based proteins, you've now increased the amount of protein, A, that you're going to need to ingest, and 2, the amount of calories that you're going to be ingesting. For example, it takes 6 cups of quinoa to equal 1 small chicken breast when it comes down to the essential amino acids.
Does protein quality matter? And the answer is absolutely yes. My brother, Dr. Gabrielle Wilson, actually did a study where he compared plant-based proteins to animal-based proteins. And what he found is that even when you control for total protein intake, the ones on plant-based protein actually gained fat and had less muscle. Whereas the ones that actually were consuming the animal-based proteins were leaner, had more muscle, and intriguingly enough, they actually had more mitochondria.
It's tough for 400, I won't lie.
She also represented Australia at the 2016 Summer Olympics.
A lot of people had doubted me when I first became vegan.
That 400 is tough, I agree. So tough that as a vegan, she can no longer do it. What's going on with Morgan Mitchell, Chris?
Morgan Mitchell, she won the Australian title, went to the Olympics, and did not run fast enough to win the Southern California Girls High School Championship track meet.
Wow, goodness gracious. And I understand that the vegan diet has taken a toll on her mental health too.
You can find articles in the Australian papers where Morgan is said to be breaking down and crying in her car 30 minutes before track practice, going out running slower than ever, and then coming back to her car and crying. She's got, really what it is plant-based mental health problems.
Yes, you can get your protein from plants or animals, your choice. The problem is that most plant protein sources come with significant baggage that pose real risks to health. For example, the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds that serve as protein staples of vegan diets are high in lectins, which can damage the gut lining and aggravate the immune system. Some of these staple foods, most notably soy, contain goitrogens, which can compromise thyroid function and therefore brain development and function. A little known secret is that just because a plant food may contain a nutrient doesn't mean we can access it. Grains, beans, nuts, and seeds are also high in phytic acid, a mineral magnet that significantly interferes with the brain's access to calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. To make matters worse, some plant nutrients exist in the wrong form, so the body has to jump through some chemical hoops before it can make use of them. For example, the form of iron found in plant foods is at least 3 times harder for us to access than the heme iron in animal foods. And thanks to oxalates found in a wide variety of plants, virtually none of the iron in spinach makes it into Popeye's muscles. A staggering 10 to 20% of young women in the US have iron deficiency. If you have iron deficiency, you don't just have a blood problem, you also have a brain problem, because the brain needs iron to make serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, the neurotransmitters we need to regulate things like mood and attention.
Morgan Mitchell is screaming at her family members, food's not even important to me, stop, blah, where they're like, you need to get help. We need to get you off of this diet that's destroying your career.
I can tell you that in my clinic, personally, the vegans and vegetarians are some of the sickest group of individuals that I have seen. It's true you can be healthy, vegan and vegetarian. However, when you're talking about optimization, it can be very, very difficult. I have seen a tremendous amount of hormone issues, GI issues, fatigue, you name it. The issues that I see with vegan and vegetarians tend to be very different than those I see with meat eaters.
She got so slow in the 400 that there were literally 10 American 9th grade girls that would beat her at her best event. And the truth is that short, fast, powerful, like these things that we believe are supremely athletic, those things take the most amount of protein.
I'm Dr. Jaime Seeman. I'm a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist. I see real patients. I'm a boots-on-the-ground physician right here in this office, right here on this table. Women in America are suffering from metabolic disease, obesity, and diet plays a crucial role in the treatment of those diseases. To tell a woman to not eat animal foods could be extremely detrimental to her health. I take care of women of reproductive age. They need important nutrients like choline, vitamin D, DHA, and B12, which are extremely deficient in a plant-based diet. As part of my job, I deliver babies. I'm about to go do a delivery right now. Pregnant women need iron and B12 in pregnancy. There's increase in red blood cell volume. The placenta is a vascular organ. The uterus gets about 30% of cardiac output during pregnancy. B12 and heme iron from animal products are extremely important in pregnancy without aggressive supplementation. Not only a doctor, but I'm a former college athlete. Women need muscle. Muscle is the organ of longevity. When you compare plant and animal proteins are much more bioavailable. All the amino acids that you need and in the form that you need.
So I found the vegan lifestyle a little over 5.5, 6 years ago at this point, and I was mostly interested in it because my health was not doing too well. I was kind of eating the standard American diet and I wanted to try something new, so I dove into eating plant-based and very quickly found raw food through that. So I was pretty much on and off eating raw vegan for 4.5 years, and the first few months and the first year were definitely the honeymoon phase. My health went skyrocketing. I felt so much better, and it makes sense looking back now in comparison to the standard American diet with some processed food and drugs and alcohol and all that good stuff. Of course I was going to feel better eating whole foods without that. But it was just a matter of time before some things started to decline in my health. One thing that I can refer to is digestion. It seemed like my entire time eating a vegan diet, I was always striving to have better digestion than I had, which sometimes came in the form of eating mono meals, which is like literally just eating fruit for a whole meal because it's easier to digest. And towards the end of my time with veganism, I was mostly struggling with neurological issues and problems with a low sex drive, and still the digestion was also a struggle. So for me, I really did not want to leave this way of eating. I didn't want to leave the community. It very much felt like the ideal way of eating. I kind of built it up to be this superhuman diet where it wasn't as impactful in a negative way on the environment, and all of the pieces made sense in theory, but when looking at what was going on in the real world, in my body, in my mind, and in a lot of my friends who were vegan for around the same amount of time, like 4 to 6 years, was what I noticed was like the turning point, and when my health and their health started to just change and decline a little bit, I reached a point where I was willing to give this a trial run, and I had some smoked salmon one night, about half a pound of it, and I woke up the next morning feeling like more clear-minded than I probably had been in like 3 or 4 years. And from that point on, I just knew that I had to keep going. That was such a pivotal moment for me to realize like this was directly related to the food that I ate the night before. And of course it wasn't easy to make that change, but it was so worth it. And the benefits have just been ongoing and growing ever since that day. I think it's so easy to watch different documentaries and follow different individuals on social media, whether it's Game Changers or What the Health, and like really feeling connected to a documentary or somebody online who's just documenting their journey and things are going really well for them. It's so easy to take all of that so seriously and base our own lifestyle behaviors on that sort of content. And what I found in my journey is it's just so important to try things out for yourself And yes, it's important to tune into information, but to not let that cloud your judgment and your intuition in what is feeling right within your body. And to also get blood work done and to see what's actually going on within yourself, and to just stay open-minded to the possibility of things changing. I have almost 800,000 YouTube subscribers, and for the majority of my time on YouTube, I was sharing my vegan lifestyle. It was a terrifying thought to come out and share that that's not the way that I'm eating anymore, and that the way that I am eating is actually helping my health. And yes, it was terrifying, but it's not the end of the world, and my health is so worth it, and so is yours.
I was surprised to learn that all protein originates in plants. Cows, pigs, and chickens, it turns out, are just the middlemen.
Well, you're taking food that is inedible to humans. Like, I'm not going to eat soy cakes. I don't think you are. Grass, fobs, corn stalks, leftover grains after you make whiskey and other types of alcohol. You feed those to cattle. They upcycle that into highly nutrient-dense and bioavailable protein. What James said a number of times in the film was cattle or animals are just the middleman. I'm like, exactly. They're really amazing middlemen. They take food that is inedible to humans and turn it into super nutrient-dense food that we can digest and absorb. I mean, thank you.
1 cup of cooked lentils or a peanut butter sandwich has about as much protein as 3 ounces of beef or 3 large eggs. But what about the quality of the protein? I'd always heard that plant-based protein was inferior.
The problem is the plant protein is inferior. We can look at the digestible indispensable amino acid score and see that all the animal foods are at the top with very high digestibility, and the plant foods are the bottom with very low digestibility. This means that it is not bioavailable to our body and does not have complete protein.
But that's not quite right. It's not how much protein is consumed, but how much protein is digested. And plant protein generally is not as well digested as animal protein. I just don't think that the movie adequately portrays the reality regarding plant protein, that it's slightly to dramatically inferior depending on the specific food.
Game Changers is a great example of what you can accomplish with an unlimited budget, an award-winning producer, impressive cinematography, bad data, and a flawed premise. I can see how, to the casual observer, one who isn't trained in human biology or evolution or genetic science or ruminant agriculture, this is a pretty impressive film. That's the problem. They cherry-pick the data and they only tell one side of a very complex story. The epitome of desperation here is they're suggesting that eating a bean burrito one night gives you a longer-lasting erection than eating a beef burrito. Seriously, guys? That's what you're going to hang your hat on? No pun intended.
I was surprised to discover that every single plant contains all the essential amino acids in varying proportions.
Varying proportions, as in almost nothing or trace amounts in plant foods. This is such a misleading statement. It is well known that plant foods don't have the same full amino acid profile.
The only American to go to the Olympics as an Olympic lifter in 2016 was Kendrick Ferris as a vegan. What happened to him?
What happened to Kendrick Ferris? He'd already made it to 2 Olympic Games. And if we can be honest about American weightlifting, its heyday was like back in the 60s. American weightlifting now has been weak for decades. You could show up and break all the American records tomorrow if you just got a US passport. But he's plant-based, and if you pause the movie, you can see that he's in the movie The Game Changers, and he's clearly got gynecomastia, and you can see his man boobs. If you go back and look at him in the 2008 Olympics and 2012 Olympics, this dude is shredded. And performance-wise,
he hit 362 in Beijing as an 85-kilo lifter. He then hit 355 in London as a 94-kilo lifter. He then hit 357 in Rio. Almost 20 pounds heavier. He totaled worse.
So he is weaker and fatter. The game has been changed. That is the message from The Game Changers. You can get weaker and fatter by switching to a plant-based diet.
It's a bitter pill to swallow. It was simply a battle of energy in there, and he got the better of that. So
The Game Changers wants you to believe that vegan Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor in the biggest upset in UFC history. Except there's a few huge problems with that. Number one, Nate Diaz is not a vegan. They call him plant-based in the film to get you to think that he's vegan. The guy is a pescatarian, and you can find YouTube videos of he and his brother chowing down on fish tacos. Now, the real story is Conor McGregor was supposed to fight Frankie Edgar at 155 pounds. 13 days before the fight, Frankie Edgar can't fight. He has to pull out of the fight. So Conor's looking for a fight, and he says, okay, I'll fight Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is a bigger dude and says, I can't make 155 pounds, fight me at 170. And Conor is so confident that he can beat Nate Diaz that he agrees to go up to 170 to fight Nate. Now, Conor started eating 2 steaks a day, was like trying to bulk up and get some size up to fight this bigger fella. And it didn't go Conor's way. In the fight, he felt lethargic. He says it's a battle of energy. I was eating 2 steaks a day. And yes, you might feel lethargic if you try to gain a ton of weight in 13 days to fight a big dude.
No one ever talks about the fact that Conor McGregor continued to eat a lot of steak, came back to beat Nate Diaz in the second fight, and that many people have since beaten Nate Diaz. Jorge Masvidal just beat Nate Diaz, and there's no real evidence that in the first fight there was any contribution of Nate's not vegan diet to his performance. It was probably due to Conor's inadequate cardiovascular training more than anything.
What you eat immediately before an athletic endeavor really can have major impact on how you perform. There's a direct correlation between a meal and endothelial function.
There's one study in the movie in which they talk about flow-mediated dilatation. Now, the problem here is that flow-mediated dilatation is probably not a great proxy for arterial function in general, nor is it a great predictor of heart attacks in healthy people. What we know is that diabetics do have dysfunction of flow-mediated dilatation, but what we also know is that healthy people get decreased flow-mediated dilatation in the arteries after they eat almost any food, even plant foods. And so this is really not a good metric for looking at heart disease risk in someone that's healthy. The way we do flow-mediated dilatation is they'll use an ultrasound to see how well an artery in the arm, called the brachial artery, dilates after it's been occluded with a blood pressure cuff. It's really an assay of how well the body is able to make nitric oxide to dilate the arteries in any situation. What we know is that the majority of foods we eat, whether they're potatoes, olive oil, bread, or hamburgers, are going to impair this because just eating food impairs flow-mediated dilatation. To suggest that flow-mediated dilatation is any sort of metric that can predict heart attacks or really tell us about endothelial function is pretty false. So it's a very non-specific measure. It's a very poor metric for heart disease risk or endothelial function. There are so many better indicators of this, and they're not telling us about all the plant foods that also impair flow-mediated dilatation. They're only highlighting the fact that some animal foods do.
When the endothelium is impaired, it cannot open up. It cannot allow blood flow to increase as much, and therefore impairs athletic performance. Today, we're going to be feeding them 3 burrito breakfasts with a lot of protein. 2 of them have sources of animal-based protein and fat. One is from beef, one is from chicken. Third is a plant-based burrito, which has beans in it. So the protein and the fat came from a plant-based source. Tomorrow, we're going to feed them all bean burritos.
We always eat fried chicken, we eat Popeyes. I love fried chicken, I love Popeyes, and I'm gonna eat Popeyes every time.
What's crazy about this is that we've repeated this experiment and shown something completely different than what they're showing in the movie here.
All right, let's figure out what's really going on with this burrito thing. We got all the ingredients right here. We're gonna remake them. We're gonna look at all the calories, all the fat, all the protein, the carbs, and I'm telling you, there's a big difference. These two burritos may look the same, but as we saw, this one has much more calories and much more fat than this one, so they are not comparable. This blood test experiment is a joke. And also, if we want to talk about protein, this meat-based burrito has much more usable protein than this one.
Big surprise if the people who ate meat, which has more fat and more saturated fat, had cloudier blood. Well, that's normal. That's just naturally what you would expect.
So I just got home from the gym, of course, powered by animal protein, but I'm gonna do a little experiment. You know, I was thinking when I was watching the Game Changers that they compared a vegetarian vegan burrito with carbs, which is low fat, to a meat burrito that still included carbs. So I'm gonna do a high fat experiment with bacon and eggs and then compare it to a vegan burrito with the equivalent amount of fat. And we'll use avocado and coconut oil.
I had a sausage and cheese omelet for breakfast. And for lunch, I had 8 ounces of brisket and 8 ounces of pulled pork.
Oh my God. Not only is this saturated fat, sodium. Nathan just made Gordon Ramsay style scrambled eggs because we didn't feel like that was enough. And we decided the eggs weren't enough either, so we're gonna go have some kefir.
So we're gonna draw the blood and then we'll spin it down in the centrifuge after it clots.
So now we're gonna go ahead and put these in the spin-a-madoodle. Put one there and one there, and then, all right, drum roll, please. We can't tell the difference between these tubes.
So you can see through it. Let me see if I can show up here. You can see through it perfectly well. It's not cloudy. It looks like how blood, once spun down, is supposed to look.
Yep. This is fasted. This is after eating far too much animal fat.
About 100 grams worth.
A lot of fat.
About an hour and a half or 2 hours ago.
And then same thing here. This is fasted and this is postprandial.
So here are the specimens, and what we're looking at on the far left is fasted. So that one's completely fasted. Ate dinner previous night. Our middle one is our eggs and bacon, and then our right one, which is clearly the cloudiest, is a vegan burrito, and the fat sources of that one are avocado and coconut oil. But the bacon and eggs was about 35 grams of fat, and the vegan burrito with avocado and coconut oil was also 35 grams of fat.
What this is describing is basically postprandial hypertriglyceridemia. That is the persistence of triglycerides in the blood after we eat. That's what we're seeing in the movie with cloudy serum above the red blood cells at the bottom. Now, what Nathan and Nick did to reproduce this experiment was eat a bunch of meat and fat, and then they took their blood 2 hours afterwards and spun it down. And these folks who are healthy, insulin sensitive, they're actually eating a carnivore diet most of the time, did not see any cloudiness in their blood. So what they're saying here is that the people who ate a burrito with chicken had more fat in their blood and more postprandial triglycerides, and that somebody with a vegan burrito had no postprandial triglycerides. Now, this to me seems totally falsified, because if Nathan and Nick can reproduce this, and we've reproduced this in other times as well, with much more protein, much more animal food, and much more fat, and get very clear serum and not have postprandial hypertriglyceridemia, it seems a little far-fetched that the one player that had chicken in their burrito, which can't be that much extra fat and can't be that much extra protein, would produce this cloudy serum. And we've repeated it and not shown it to be reproducible or true. But nevertheless, postprandial hypertriglyceridemia may indicate some sort of metabolic dysfunction that's underlying. They're looking at different people in this, so we don't know how healthy any of these people are. And there are people in this video who say that they like Popeyes, they're already eating junk food, so we assume they're already insulin resistant. So there are too many variables to really draw much from this. But the takeaway here is that when this experiment has been repeated with lots of animal protein and lots of animal fat, we saw essentially no cloudiness to the serum after those experiments. So this appears to me to be pretty falsified and inaccurate.
All right, so this blood test is a joke. How are we taking these guys seriously? Everything about it is wrong, disingenuous, misrepresenting science. The cloudy blood doesn't even show endothelial dysfunction. That is just showing triglycerides in your blood. And if you're eating high carb and high fat meal, like a burrito with beef and cheese, then your body has to deal with all this glucose, and yes, there is more triglycerides in your blood temporarily. So it was actually the carbs that are causing the cloudy blood. If you're eating high carbs and high fat together, then it gets cloudy. You could have a whole bunch of plant fat and carbs together and it'll be cloudy as well. So also, we don't even know for sure if having this cloudy blood is bad. It just means that there's fuel in your blood to be used and that you haven't used it yet. But from the tests that they've done, they're completely disingenuous, they're completely lying to you, they're unfairly smearing animal foods as a culprit, and you can't take these people seriously.
In animal products, you're getting protein packaged with inflammatory molecules like Nu-5GC, endotoxins, and heme iron.
So I love that they're trying to contrast plant and animal protein and claiming that plant protein is less inflammatory, because this is completely false, and there is a series here of made-up statements that is quite misleading. So they're claiming that meat is packaged with inflammatory molecules, which in and of itself is incorrect. If you look at interventional studies with red meat, this has been shown time and time again. We're not talking about epidemiology here. We're talking about interventional studies with red meat. Red meat has been shown multiple times to not promote inflammation. They're claiming that there are 3 molecules, or at least 3 substances in red meat that are promoting inflammation: Nu-5GC, heme iron, and lipopolysaccharide. So let's address these individually. Nu-5GC is a sialic acid. It's a glycoprotein residue that humans don't possess. We've lost Nu-5GC. We have other sialic acids, other glycoproteins that identify our cells, Nu-5Ac, but the majority of the animals we consume, or at least red meat containing animals, ruminants, have Nu-5GC. So many have advanced the argument that Nu-5GC is inflammatory. However, there are no studies in humans to show this at all. What they are basing this on is 1 or 2 studies in rats in which the model is completely contrived and inaccurate. And if we look at human studies, there's actually a very large study in humans who received polyclonal antibodies for a kidney transplant from rabbits. And the rabbits have Nu-5GC. So they're included in this polyclonal antibody serum that the kidney transplants receive as an immunomodulatory therapy as part of their kidney transplantation process. These recipients are getting lots of Nu-5GC antibodies and lots of Nu-5GC. And what they've been able to show longitudinally is that there's no increased risk of any cancers or any inflammation associated with this huge influx of Nu-5GC and anti-Nu-5GC antibodies in these kidney transplant patients. So Nu-5GC is a complete fallacy, and anyone who is promoting this or suggesting that there's clear evidence that Nu-5GC is harmful to humans is basing this on pure conjecture rather than scientific fact.
The idea is that Nu-5GC in meat causes an autoimmune response, and that increases the risk of disease. The problem is that hasn't been proven at all. 2003 paper found that feeding people large quantities of Nu-5GC didn't actually increase their serum levels of Nu-5GC. So that's a problem. If you have studies showing that eating it doesn't actually increase it in your blood, then it doesn't really make much of a difference. And then you have groups like the Maasai. You could not design a diet higher in Nu-5GC. They drink blood and milk from cows and they eat beef.
Yeah.
And they have no, extremely low rates of cardiovascular disease.
The second molecule they say is lipopolysaccharide. So lipopolysaccharide is a component of gram-negative organism cell walls. So there's no LPS in meat, but there's LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, which is synonymous with endotoxin, in the bacteria in our gut. But endotoxin is not a component of meat itself. Endotoxin is a nuanced topic. They're clearly not digging into the nuances regarding endotoxin, but it's been found that whether endotoxin, which is synonymous with LPS, whether this enters through normal circulation in the gut, which is through chylomicrons, particles that are composed of triglycerides and other fats in our body that go into the cells of the gastrointestinal epithelial lining. If LPS enters that way, it's probably the normal way for LPS to come into the body and we detoxify it. LPS, or endotoxin, is shown to be damaging to humans when it goes across leaky gut. And that is what they're not differentiating. Regardless of all of that, there is no endotoxin in red meat in and of itself. The third molecule we're talking about is heme iron. What they're neglecting to tell us in this video is that heme iron is the most highly absorbable form of iron, and that many people become frankly anemic if they don't get heme iron in their diet. So heme iron is clearly a very valuable thing for humans. There are some studies in rodents, that is mice and rats, that show that in calcium deficient models, heme iron may lead to the formation of N-nitroso compounds, which can promote colon cancer in mice and rats. But when they give the rats adequate calcium, all of the apparent dangers of heme iron vanish. They're referencing ill effects in rodent models that were calcium deficient, and these ill effects were completely eliminated when calcium was restored to the diets of these rodents.
So this is the largest meta-analysis of heme iron studies. And again, for people not familiar with the term meta-analysis, it's where you look at all, a bunch of different studies that have been done and you analyze them together. It's considered to be a very high quality form of evidence. So they looked at all significant studies through 2015, and they found a significant association between heme iron and disease only in the American cohorts. In the Netherlands, Canada, France, Italy, Japan, and Sweden, there was no association found. So what does that tell us? Well, if you eat heme iron in the context of a super crappy standard American diet, it's associated with cancer and a problem. But if you eat heme iron in a European diet, which is less crappy than the US, it's not.
So heme iron, not an issue. Endotoxin, frankly wrong, does not occur in meat. We all have it, and it's just a matter of not getting endotoxin coming across leaky gut.
So then they start trying to figure out what are the mechanisms. And so initially the mechanism was saturated cholesterol, then it was saturated fat. Now those are not as defensible, so they're moving on to these new mechanisms. Well, research on mechanisms is not very convincing if the outcome isn't there. Right. So you had that large paper that was just published, the 5 papers in the Annals that showed basically no evidence that red meat is correlated with any disease. So why are we even bothering looking for all these mechanisms that explain why red meat causes disease when we've got this exhaustive study that says that it doesn't?
It's hard to trust people who continually leave out information like this. It makes it seem like they have a narrative and they're going to promote that narrative at all costs.
So they're kind of grasping at straws here. It's a compelling story they're trying to paint, but it's totally false.
Hi, my name is Shawn Cosgrove. I'm a personal trainer from Glasgow, Scotland, and I used to be a vegetarian/vegan for about 4 years before turning carnivore. I've been carnivore now for 14 months. The problems I was having when I was vegan were mostly digestive problems, and I'd ran my diet issues with a lot of vegans, and they'd pointed me in the right direction as to what they would call the right direction, and it did aid some of my digestive problems. Bloating, gas, both ends, basically IBS symptoms is what I was getting. That also led to lack of energy, and the thing that all brought it to an end was I was getting really bad, muscular pain, mood swings, just low energy, and what I had suspected is low testosterone. So I then went to get my bloods tested, and right enough my testosterone was low. It's meant to be between 10 and 36 millimoles per litre, and the levels of mine were 13.6. After just being a few weeks on carnivore, my testosterone levels had actually doubled, and then that's basically why I stayed on it. And other issues I was having with being vegan was having to eat so frequently, basically 8 times a day, every 2 hours, whereas now I'm on just 3 times a day, sometimes only once a day.
Yeah, I was a vegan, I was vegetarian, I was a raw food vegan, I was a macrobiotic vegan. I have a lot of friends who are vegan, I have patients that are vegan. I have nothing against vegans, and I totally get the reasons that people become vegan. But I, like many others and my patients in my community, my health was harmed by that. And I lost weight, and as you can see, I don't have a lot to lose to begin with. My digestion got really screwed up. I got depressed. I'd never been depressed. I've never been a person who gets depressed. I felt anxious. It just was clearly not working for me.
Whole food plant-based diet is going to optimize the growth of blood vessels into damaged tissue. It's going to lay down new tissue in tendons and muscles.
So now they're claiming that the plant proteins are going to optimize the microbiome, optimize inflammation, and optimize performance. These are, again, 3 pretty broad and false claims. Plant proteins, plant molecules certainly do not optimize the microbiome. There are plenty of studies that show that plant fiber does not change the alpha diversity of the microbiome, and that withdrawal of plant fiber in a fully carnivorous diet does not decrease alpha diversity in the human microbiome. Alpha diversity is a measure of the different species in our gut, and it's generally thought of as perhaps a reasonably good proxy for gut health, but there is no evidence that we need plant fiber to have a robust alpha diversity, and there's no evidence that taking away plant fiber in a carnivore diet reduces it. There are studies on both sides which illustrate both of those issues. So to say that plant fiber or plant protein creates an optimal microbiome is, again, total conjecture, not founded by science.
It would also help explain why the only diet that has ever been shown to actually reverse heart disease is a plant-based one.
They reference Dr. Dean Ornish's lifestyle heart trial as evidence that a plant-based diet is the only diet to have ever reversed heart disease. What they don't mention is the size of the trial or the fact that the participants were also exercising, receiving stress management and other support, and not smoking.
In the baseline characteristics of the control group versus the experimental group were totally different. The experimental group weighed 34 pounds more than the control group. So they had more, they were more overweight, they had more weight to lose,
Right.
And
they were less healthy.
I mean, that study would be thrown out today.
When you eat animal products, you start to form plaques in the coronary arteries.
Okay, full stop. This is completely made up. There's been no study to ever show this. They are completely making this up. We'd all be dead if this was true.
And it isn't just the iron in animal foods that can cause problems. It's actually the animal protein itself.
It's not just red meat, not just chicken, not just eggs, not just milk. It's the ingestion of any animal protein.
Again, humans wouldn't even exist, or we'd all die at 40 if this was true. Come on.
This statement is so funny, it's absurd. If animal foods are so bad, then how can the longest living people in the world, the people of Hong Kong, eat the most meat? And also the Japanese, who ate a very high amount of meat, are also some of the longest living people in the world. How are you going to explain this one away? It's funny that they're trying to portray animal foods as being bad, when the most problems come from a diet that's completely plant foods.
They built their strength or their agility or their speed or whatever on a diet with animal products. And then at some point they became vegan, and maybe their performance continued and they continued to do well, like Scott Jurek or Dottie Bausch, or maybe they had the vegan honeymoon where they did well for a while and then they declined, or maybe they just declined like some of the NBA and NFL athletes we talked about. But this is a critical point because there are key developmental periods when we're kids and also in utero that, like, if you're not getting the nutrition you need then, it's going to carry through to your whole life.
Part of my fellowship training was in geriatrics, and that is individuals at the end of their life. And I cannot tell you, being at the bedside of hundreds of dying individuals, the effect that low muscle mass has on their body. It's devastating. And one of the ways that we know to protect muscle mass as you age is high quality protein. And in particular, high quality animal protein. To tell individuals to now go plant-based later on in life is devastating and will have absolutely devastating consequences.
And so it's like, what did your parents eat? What did your mom eat when she was breastfeeding you? What did you eat as a young kid? So we follow that whole argument through. If everyone becomes plant-based, it's going to have a huge intergenerational impact on performance. It's not like people who built their strength and performance eating meat and then they go vegan, they do okay for a little while. It's like, what are the consequences of that happening to everybody?
I discovered that the meat, dairy, and egg industries have engaged in a covert response, funding studies that deny this evidence.
James Cameron was one of the filmmakers. He also is the owner of Verdient Foods, which is a pea protein company, and he said he has the goal of it becoming the biggest organic pea protein company in the world. He's invested $140 million into it.
Now with doing it the right way, with the right spices, all of a sudden, I love it much more than the meat.
My favorite thing to cook is, of course, steak. Now there's an egg, a raw egg that we put in there. Well, actually, I like to put in the whole egg.
When we think about the diet of early humans, we're often drawn to thinking about meat, but plant foods were more important than the archaeological record gives credit for. The food that could be relied on wherever you were, was the plant food.
Oh my God, exactly backwards. This guy has it exactly backwards. The plant foods are what we didn't have across the world. We had meat and some kind of animal protein everywhere we went in every climate. We did not have plant foods for winter. We didn't have plant foods in northern climates. This is insane. It doesn't make any sense.
Leading to the discovery that early humans ate mostly plants.
Humans do not have any specialized genetic, anatomical, or physiological adaptations to meat consumption. By contrast, we have many adaptations to plant consumption.
Oh my God, this is insane. They got one vegan lady who's an anthropologist, and somehow she speaks for the 99.9% of the rest of the world that doesn't believe this at all. There's no way humans were mostly plant-based. We have hard data showing that they were highly carnivorous, actually. They were at the top of the food chain. You can see in this study by the stable isotope nitrogen testing that we were highly carnivorous. We were eating mostly animals. We know by the optimum foraging theory that we can't gather enough calories, and it wasn't even worth our time to pick all these leaves. We wanted to seek highly nutrient-dense animal foods and some tubers, which actually had enough calories for a return on our investment of time.
We have longer digestive tracts than do carnivores.
Actually, we have had a lot of adaptations away from plant foods and towards meat. Our small intestine has got a lot longer, where we digest highly nutrient-dense foods like meat, and our large intestines have got shorter, where we digest the plant foods.
The film spreads misinformation about metabolism. Dr. Thomas, a geneticist interviewed in the film, made the following unfortunate, almost entirely incorrect statement.
We have a brain that just is desperate for glucose. It's such a fussy organ. That's the only thing it really takes in for energy. Well, meat's not a very good source of glucose. To have a big brain like this, you need to eat something different. And the most efficient way to get glucose is to eat carbohydrates.
So there's a process known as gluconeogenesis, and you can get that from the glycerol backbone of fatty acids. You can get that from certain amino acids that aren't important for building muscle, and your brain can make enough glucose and survive on enough glucose that your body can make on its own. So the fact that someone says you need glucose to survive is right. The best part about it is that your body can make exactly what it needs to survive. It doesn't need exogenous glucose or exogenous carbohydrates because of that.
It is true that the brain needs some glucose at all times, but most of the brain, about 2/3 of it, is designed from birth to be able to run on ketones as well, which come from fat. If you eat carbohydrate all day and night, yes, your brain will run almost entirely on glucose, but that doesn't mean it is best for the brain to eat this way. It turns out that ketones are a cleaner and more efficient fuel for the brain than glucose. In fact, according to distinguished neuroscience researcher Professor Stephen Cunnane, most brain cells prefer ketones over glucose. What you need to worry about is high brain glucose, because if you eat too many of the wrong carbohydrates too often, your blood sugar and brain sugar will spike too high, causing damaging inflammation, oxidation, and insulin resistance of the brain. These are root causes of many neuropsychiatric disorders, from depression to Alzheimer's disease.
Carnivores have distinctive teeth, and they're shaped like scissor blades. They simply shred the meat off and they swallow. Compare that to the teeth of a human being, square and low cusp for crushing and grinding tough plant tissues. Right there in your own mouth is the best evidence we have for a diet that could not have been meat.
I get it, we didn't evolve from carnivores, we evolved from primates.
Suddenly it all made sense. The reason an animal-based diet isn't good for us is because our bodies aren't built for it. It's simply the wrong type of fuel.
Any discussion about diet that begins with the question, what foods are humans designed to eat, is destined for failure. And the reason is because the human body is not designed to eat almost every food on the planet. Humans, in fact, have one of the least efficient digestive tracts of any animal. We are an incredibly weak species, and because of that have a very difficult time extracting resources from our environment as food. But what's even more important is that our digestive tract is incredibly inefficient. And even when we can get resources, we have an incredibly difficult time transforming those resources into something that our body can safely and efficiently derive nutrition from. The more relevant question to ask is, on what diet were these bodies and these incredibly large brains built on? And to answer that question, we need to look at the role of technologies in our dietary past. And in fact, those technologies began 3.5 million years ago. Technologies like this stone tool were transformative and allowed our ancestors to not only extract more and better resources from our environment. Our scavenging ancestors would go in after a carnivore killed another animal and get the leftovers. But when we start hunting, we have first access to those animals. We get the most nutrient-rich, the most nutrient-dense part of that animal. In this context, the fact that we don't have large canines to rip apart carcasses on the African savanna is irrelevant. We haven't needed canines for 3.5 million years because in less than a second, we can create razor-sharp edges that are just as efficient, if not even more efficient, than these huge canines. The role of technology transcends our dietary past and is actually what made us human. Animals and plants were both key elements in our dietary past and need to be key elements in our dietary present.
So why should meat be included in a healthy diet?
I'll start by saying meat's always been included in a healthy diet. Meat is what humans evolved as a primary source of protein. And we're not just talking about ribeye steaks and tenderloin, but we're talking about eggs and newts and absolutely small animals as well as large animals. We're talking about insects, which was part of that protein offering that for 2.5 million years, we took in order to stay alive and build muscle and have the energy that we have to get to where we are today. So meat is 100% part of a healthy diet. In fact, I'd be hard-pressed to name a society or a group of people that ever survived without some form of animal protein.
Like Mark is saying, if you look at the size of the human brain, it exploded, not literally, but figuratively. It grew quite rapidly around 2 million years ago, and most scientists agree that was the advent of humans, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, eating meat, eating animals. And that, I think, nutrition shaped the way that our brains could develop in a very profound way. If you look at sources of bioavailable nutrients, animal foods are clearly far and away the best of those. And a lot of times plant-based advocates will tout nutrients in plants, but if you just look at the facts regarding the bioavailability and the presence of nutrients, animal foods are clearly the winner for those. And that would suggest, why the human brain grew so rapidly once we had access to these incredibly rich sources of bioavailable nutrients of all sorts. Eating animals became this key to sort of unlock our continued evolution as humans, and it continues to be a huge part of what makes us healthy today.
Yeah, I mean, we are uniquely adapted to digest and process meat. I mean, we have transporters in the gut that are uniquely designed to take up diantripeptides that are coming from meat. I mean, if we look at, we were primates, we evolved as a primate, and there are primates that have been eating fruit for 25 million years or more, and their brain hasn't developed, and so something had to change. And you're right, the discovery of either first maybe possibly scavenging meat and then eventually learning how to organize and hunt drove much of that evolution. And we haven't changed. There hasn't been enough time to turn us back into herbivores, which some people are trying to do now, which is kind of crazy.
My name is Nika and I'm 25 years old. I was vegetarian since I was 11 years old and I was vegan since I was 21. Last year I developed problems with my digestive tract. My body just started rejecting every food that I ate and I was in pain all the time. So they hospitalized me 2 times and they had no idea what is wrong with me. They thought that I have Crohn's disease or colitis, but everything came out negative, so they just say that I have IBS.
I ended up, after these 15 years, with like a B12 deficiency that almost got to a point of no return. And fortunately enough, after I started to study more about nutrition, intermittent fasting and ketogenic diet, carnivore diet, I could have what I have right now. Energy levels that are steady, strong physical practice, and a mental stability that I could never experience before.
When I changed my diet to carnivore, I completely eliminated plants and plant toxins with it as well. So everything is much better. I still have problems with depression, I still have problems with digestive problems, but nothing compared to what it was before. So it's much better.
The only thing that didn't really fit was B12, an important vitamin that everyone kept warning me you could only get from animal foods. And up to 39% of people tested, including meat eaters, are low in B12. As a result, the best way for humans to get enough B12, whether they eat animal foods or not, is simply to take a supplement.
This has got to be the stupidest argument I've ever heard, that the best way to get it is from a pill.
Before industrial farming, farm animals and humans could get B12 by eating traces of dirt on plant foods.
What? They're claiming that people are eating enough soil to get B12? I mean, this is crazy. If we looked at plant-based eaters and measured their B12, we would find rampant B12 deficiency, whether it's clinical or subclinical, but we would certainly not have been purposely eating dirt to get B12. That's crazy.
There's also zero evidence that B12 is fed to cattle, and there's no evidence that humans have ever been able to meet their B12 needs from just eating soil and water. Well, it's also required for the myelin sheath in our nerves. B12 deficiency can cause serious and even irreversible neurological damage. A lot of the harm that happens with kids on the vegan diet comes from B12 deficiency. It can decrease fluid intelligence. It can cause neurological damage that's not reversible even after they start eating meat again.
Now, our next guest used to be known as the Vegan Prince, with thousands of online followers regularly listening to him to share his views.
After claiming that the vegan lifestyle was actually making him sick, Tim Schieff decided to give it all up and says he'd now even consider hunting animals for food.
About 7 years ago, when I was 24, I chose to become vegan, having watched a few speeches and documentaries looking into the science behind it and really believing everything that I saw, and it made a lot of sense to me at the time. Dived into it with both feet for ethical reasons, the way animals are treated, and for the health benefits. And within the first few weeks, I've definitely felt a lot better in myself. I felt healthier, and that went on, and I noticed improvements for months. Probably up to a year, I noticed improvements. And after about a year into veganism, being pretty committed to it, and the community, because I'm an athlete, the community sort of took to me and started to promote me as well. And that lasted for 3-4 years as I felt good and was continuing to make or meet my athletic potential. And then things I started to sense weren't quite right in my body, and I started to search for other ways to feel healthy. I started to blame it on my past before veganism, or the dairy and the meat that I'd eaten before veganism. So for years I was trying to solve my health issues within veganism, within the vegan spectrum of nutrition, and I tried many things. And it wasn't until I stepped outside of that bubble that I was able to start reclaiming my health. So I just implore anyone that wants to try veganism, that's tempted by game changers or anything like that, feel free to try it, play with it. There's certainly some short-term benefits for some people, but stay present in the body, listen to your body, listen to how that's feeling. Long-term, I really think it's quite dangerous for many people, especially Westerners. So in the movie Game Changers, they talk about erectile dysfunction and being associated with consuming animal products. So my N=1 experiment on myself, the first day after I consumed animal products for the first time in 6 years was some salmon. That night I had a wet dream. Is there a scientific word for wet dream?
Nocturnal emission.
Really?
Yeah, nocturnal emission.
Emission.
Nocturnal emission.
The very night I had a nocturnal emission. And for me, that was a massive sign or clue that something was switched back on in my body, some hormones. It wasn't an issue for me, but it woke something up to a deeper level. I actually filmed a segment for Game Changers in 2015. I had long hair at the time. We filmed around London. I got my best videographer on the job. We filmed a really cool shoot. And the director actually said it was his favourite section of all the sections they'd filmed up to that point. It was his favourite section of the movie so far. Then they started to film they got more and more role with the film and got more and more athletes involved. It just took ages till it actually came out. And it finally, by the time it was about to come out, I'd actually not stopped being vegan and noticed for the health issues that I'd encompassed within veganism. And I told them, I said, you might want to take me out because I don't want to bring any bad press to your guys' movie. And then here we are, giving it bad press with this. But yeah, I just told them to take me out of the movie. It's probably for the best that they take me out. I had a Skype chat with them. They offered to give me nutritional guidance and advice. And for me, I'd got the answers that I was looking for. They weren't the answers I wanted, but they're the answers I was looking for my health.
When an erection is starting, because when it squeezes, it'll determine, oh, it's now of a larger circumference, something's happening. What we're going to look at is what effect the meal you have has on your erections that night. And you're going to be eating 2 different kinds of meals.
So they were looking at nocturnal tumescence, which is nocturnal erections in men, and there are so many flaws to this study. There's no control group, there's no randomization, there's no standardization, and there's a big confounder here that they are wrapping a band around their penis, and the first night for all of the people, they ate a meat-based burrito. And then the second night, they ate the vegetarian burrito. And it's totally possible, and this is the problem without a control group, without any randomization, or without any structuring of the order in which these burritos were eaten, that they could have become much more comfortable with putting on the apparatus, or much more comfortable with wearing the apparatus the second night, and that could have affected the strength or the girth in these nocturnal erections from these men. So it's really not a scientific study at all. It's further proof that this movie is really just interested in shock value.
So I'll show you something. This is something known as blood flow restriction. So this is blood flow restriction training wraps. And what you do is you basically wrap this around your leg, and there's been multiple studies showing that blood flow restriction training can increase muscle mass, it can help prevent sarcopenia and things like that. But if you take someone and they're completely novice, have never done blood flow restriction before in their entire life, and you put blood flow restriction wraps on them, their performance day 1 would go like this. It would decline. They're not used to having blood flow restriction wraps on their legs, and so you need to adapt them. When you're doing research, when you're doing clinical trials, whatever we're doing something and we're incorporating in a device, you need to have people adapt to that device for a minimum of 3 to 7 days before you actually start the trial. You need to allow them to get used to whatever it is that they're doing, the intervention. And in this case, they literally took all the people who were eating meat, and these kids have never had something on their area, I'm sure, during the entire night. And of course they're gonna have problems. They probably woke up in the middle of the night. They didn't monitor the quality of their sleep. They probably were like, what is this what is this down there that's measuring me in the middle of the night? And then night 2, they were a little bit more accustomed to the device. That's likely why they had improvements in erections and hardness, not because meat causes impairments in endothelial function, because there's no data to support that.
What can we conclude from this experiment? Absolutely nothing. Because it was just an experiment that was made up and done in a film. It was not peer reviewed. It's not scientific at all.
Now, this is not a scientifically validated study.
So really, at the end of the night, the guy eating the big steak is soft, and then the guy's in the heart.
So clearly this is included as more like evidence for a plant-based, for a vegan diet, which is just irresponsible. In actuality, there isn't any scientific literature looking specifically at veganism and erectile dysfunction. Even this article from PCRM does not link to any study on veganism because it does not exist. The fact that the only thing that comes up when you search vegan erectile dysfunction on PubMed is a case report about a guy who experienced loss of libido and erectile dysfunction after eating a vegan style diet with a shit ton of soy. But it's the exaggerating, it's getting men's hopes up with stupid little studies. You know, that's what bothers me.
And I'm making truffle mac and cheese, buffalo wings, and we'll finish off with the peanut butter cheesecake.
Wow. Just because these foods are plant-based, does anyone think they're actually healthy? Who would eat this stuff and think they're having a healthy diet?
This is not a causal link between red and processed meat and any type of cancer.
But would you recommend reducing meat intake?
No, not at all.
How on earth is the viewer supposed to make sense of all of this?
Now, this is the only part of the film I agree with.
This whole fantasy that we need meat to get our protein, it's actually bullshit. I mean, look at a gorilla. A gorilla will fuck you up in 2 seconds. What does a gorilla eat?
Now, people talk about how strong gorillas are, but one of the nice things about being a gorilla is you get to eat your own poop. They have a rear gut fermentation. That's where their B12 is made, and so they have to eat their own feces. You know, and then, by the way, a gorilla is going to eat about 40 to 60 pounds of food a day. That's quite a bit of food, quite honestly, for a 350-pound animal.
Like if you're trying to do this vegan, if you're trying to eat unprocessed plant food, there's just no way you're going to do it. And there are no natural foods. There is no natural apple. Every food that we have in the supermarket has been hybrided and hybrided and hybrided to create something that you can actually maybe digest. And to your point about the gorillas, off of their intestines, they have this giant pouch called the cecum that does all this fermentation. It's the size of a football. As a human being, an ape cousin to the gorilla, your cecum is the size of this pinky, and it is just not going to allow you to digest 40 pounds of raw plant material every day.
Meat, dairy, egg, and fish farming use 83% of the world's farmland, yet provide only 18% of the world's calories.
83% of the land and only 18% of the calories? That doesn't make any sense. The majority of the land that cattle are grazed on can't even be used to farm crops or vegetables or soil or plants in any way, shape, or form. So it's non-tillable land. Furthermore, we know that monocrop agriculture depletes the soil, especially the topsoil, of organic nutrients and causes erosion and destruction of waterways after runoff of the topsoil. So monocrop agriculture is a horrible thing for our land.
Meat plays a disproportionately large role in causing this overuse of fresh water.
Okay, this is very misleading. They're counting rainwater into these equations. If you look at this graphic based on a study, you can see there's very little fresh water needed for cattle. And that fresh water that they drink, they urinate back onto the soil and it's reused.
Then they go on to say that animals eat 6 times more protein than they produce, which goes back to what we were saying about plant bioavailability in the first part, that animal protein is much more bioavailable than plant protein. These are not level playing fields, and that statistic is completely false.
From this study, we can see that cattle produce 1 to 3 times as much usable protein as they consume.
Shifting away from an animal-based diet would reduce agricultural emissions by up to 73% and save 1 million liters of water per person per year.
For every one of their studies, there's a counter study showing almost the opposite. Plus, again, they're counting in rainwater here. And they're counting factory farming, which is not how we want to do things. We want animals on pasture for their entire life. This is shown to actually put carbon back into the soil and sequesters more carbon than emitted by the cow's methane.
Would removing animal products from our diet have, saved the world, basically? Would it reduce greenhouse gases? Would it improve our nutrition? Basically, they found that it would only reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2.6%, but our intake of carbohydrates, total calories, would go way up, and the incidence of nutrient deficiencies would go way up. And they went on to say that basically there's already a surplus of calories in the diet of 145%. If we removed animal products entirely, that would go up to 230%. So that because the volume of calories in food that would be required to meet basic nutrient and protein needs would be that much higher.
Water has been fed into the grain that's been fed to the cattle. The cattle's been made into beef.
Regenerative agriculture is a whole different story. Here's world-renowned regenerative farmer Joel Salatin from the upcoming Food Lies film.
Good, healthy pasture has a bacteria called methanotrophic bacteria. That methanotrophic bacteria gobbles up and metabolizes more methane than can possibly be produced by double the amount of cows that could ever be grown on that pasture. So when the grass gets too long for the chickens, then we bring the cows in to mow the grass down for the chickens. When they're mobbed up, they have to graze very aggressively and haphazardly. We call them equal opportunity graziers, okay? They're just taking it rapidly because they know that there's 1,000 behind them, and if I don't eat this right now, there's not going to be any left in 30 minutes. And so that accelerated, aggressive grazing actually helps to prune everything on the landscape and not just let the unpalatables go to seed and begin to dominate. So it changes the successional vegetation of the landscape. And so our mandate is not to adulterate that or think we're smarter than that, but how do we duplicate that template and cut it like a pattern and lay it down on our piece of property and duplicate that synergy of nature.
According to studies, we only have 60 harvests left with the way we are doing things. With regenerative agriculture using cattle and other animals, it is not only possible to feed the world, It's actually the only way we can feed the world, according to the Savory Institute.
I'm Stan Efferding, and I was recently asked about the movie The Game Changers. As a professional athlete myself, and as a coach for nearly 30 years, who's worked with thousands of high school, collegiate, and professional athletes, I'm mostly interested in what's been proven to work for the majority of people, the majority of the time, both scientifically and in practice. Now, just because it's possible for a vegan to become a successful athlete doesn't make it optimal. I'm sure you can find many more successful athletes who eat fast food on a daily basis, but I wouldn't recommend that either. Now, there will always be outliers who succeed, but those anecdotes and testimonials shouldn't be used to make blanket recommendations. Just because it's possible doesn't make it probable. Now, even vegan studies peg the lack of compliance to be around 85%, which is probably a good thing, since most of the athletes in the movie were admittedly Chegans or vegetarians, and they ate some fish or eggs or dairy, which is a net positive for performance. Now, a strictly vegan diet is not optimal for performance. Even vegan research consistently shows higher rates of micronutrient deficiencies in iron, zinc, selenium, vitamins A, D, B12, along with calcium, iodine, and omega-3s. Now, particularly in athletes, they have significantly higher demands. Now look, at the end of the day, athletes only care what works best. If eating a brick would make us better athletes, we'd eat a brick. So as a practical matter, if a vegan diet worked better, I'd recommend it. It doesn't, so I don't.
Everybody's talked about the defensive line in this diet.
It was the burritos.
They're doing the burrito thing again. They just keep doing burritos.
You talk about the Tennessee Titans. You had some statistics on them. They're all injured, cut, retired.
Yeah, it's interesting when you follow the athletes out. There's a dinner scene from the Tennessee Titans when you follow up all the athletes and you look at Derek Morgan, whose wife is hosting the dinner. He retired before the movie even came out. And most of the athletes, a large percentage of those athletes are either cut or no longer playing in the NFL, retired, or playing in a diminished capacity as vegan. We don't know how many of them stick with the vegan diet. Most of those guys probably, step away from that.
Well, and it's also the hype of the film. Several times in the movie, we take people that are fully omnivorous and we have them have a plant-based burrito one time. And turns out they're still healthy young men.
I always try to, tap into something that's gonna better me. So this off season, I was like, man, I want to try something different. I'm vegan now.
Oh, Cam, what are you doing? Cam Newton, you are destroying your multi-mega million-dollar NFL career. You're destroying the chances of a billion-dollar NFL franchise for veganism. It is entirely and totally misguided.
Collagen is critical for muscle recovery and repair, and it's hard to you can make some collagen, but I think a lot of people on a plant-based diet, if they're high-level athletes and they're not really getting collagen coming in, it's going to be difficult.
An 8-week weight training trial also found that those consuming a normal amount of carbs gained 2.9 pounds of muscle mass, while those in the low-carb group actually lost muscle.
So a lot of times people ask about ketogenic diets and muscle, right? They think you need carbohydrates, you need insulin to gain muscle. And we've literally been looking at this since 2010. It was the first study we ever did when we embarked on looking at ketogenic diets. And we really basically took people and we took them and we adapted them for 2 weeks. And we trained them for 8 weeks. And at the end of that 10-week period, we compared them to a group that was eating a higher carbohydrate, lower fat diet. But the best part about this is, guess what? The protein was matched. No other study has compared a ketogenic diet versus a high carbohydrate diet and matched for protein and looked at body composition. And we did. And you know what we found? Both groups were able to gain just as much muscle, but the ketogenic dieting group was able to lose significantly more fat mass. And you know, the best part about this is this study's been replicated since, and it's been shown in different scenarios.
So what dictates the quality of a protein? Well, when it comes to muscle growth and mitochondrial health, it's the amino acid leucine, okay? What studies show is that you need about 2 to 3 grams of leucine to maximally stimulate muscle growth and muscle health per serving. Well, if you look at like a plant-based protein, it might be 5% leucine, no more than 6%. Whereas animal-based proteins can be as high as 10 or 11% leucine. So what does that mean? You basically need half the amount of animal-based proteins to maximize muscle health as you would for plant-based proteins.
Hello y'all, this is Robert Sikes. Just want to let y'all know that I've been bodybuilding, natural bodybuilder for over 10 years of my life. It's what I live and breathe. I absolutely love it. First 5 years of that consisted of following a traditional bodybuilding bro diet approach, high in carbs, high in protein, eating every 2.5 hours, living out of Tupperware. I developed a bunch of eating disorders. I got super depressed. Life was not looking good. Since then, I've found keto. I follow a high-fat, moderate protein, very low to minimal carb approach, and I feel like $1,000,000. So much so that last year, I earned my bodybuilding pro card, came in better conditioning than I ever have before in my life, and I felt good doing it.
So they claim that antioxidants are higher in plants. This is right, but again, they're leaving out information. This is highly manipulative. And think about it. Are the carnivore animals out there getting sick? Are all these leopards and cheetahs and lions just falling over because they're not getting enough antioxidants? Do you know why plants are higher in antioxidants? Because they need to protect themselves from damage, from the sun, from the elements. And that when you eat a high carbohydrate diet, a high plant-based diet, you need more antioxidants because you're producing more ROS, more oxygen species, so that you can run this fuel through the oxygen, through the Krebs cycle. And it's that simple. It's so simple. So when you're eating a carnivore diet, when you're eating a meat-based diet, you don't need the antioxidants. Now, what's the most ideal thing? To have both. To have the meat-based diet and to have the antioxidants. But antioxidants don't solve everything. There's very little data that shows that having tons of antioxidants is going to be anti-aging and health promoting. What it shows is that it's needed for oxidation to counter that. And so when you have a lot less oxidation, you don't need the antioxidants.
The diet that is going to have you thrive the best is 25 to 50% of your calories from complete whole foods, animal sources. If you want your ligaments to be good, you want your bones to be good, you want your tendons and your muscles and all your organs to function, then give them what they need. You're made out of meat, eat the meat. The reason eating grass works for cows is because they have that 4-chambered stomach. You don't. The real problem with veganism is when you commit to this zealous ideology long term. I'm not saying you can't have a plant-based burrito and have like decent circulation for one day.
Jurek did it in 46 days, 8 hours, and 7 minutes. 3 hours faster than the previous record.
Where you see vegans having some success in what you could say is approaching the long term is the stuff where it doesn't require as much protein. It is the long, slow, boring endurance stuff that nobody wants to do. So yeah, if you're a Scott Jurek, maybe you can hike the whole Appalachian Trail, you're going slow, and you've got minimal protein requirements, and it would be way better to have quality protein. He takes off doing the Appalachian Trail and tears his hamstring in the movie. Oh, I tore my hamstring, so I had to double down on plant-based nutrition. That's maybe the biggest line of nonsense in the entire film.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you follow that out and you see the Appalachian Trail in this movie's 2 years ago. That record has been passed by something like 5 days, and the guy that did it was a Belgian dentist who was eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, by the way.
To say that Scott Jurek's record on the Appalachian Trail was remarkable, yeah, he did a great thing. He did through the Appalachian Trail quickly, but it was quickly broken by people who had animal-based diets. So to suggest that it was his vegan diet which made him immortal or invincible is incorrect and pretty false in the realm of ultra running.
For me personally, when I'm watching a documentary, one of the first things I like to look for is where the evidence and the opinions being shared are coming from both or multiple sides, or if they're simply just trying to kind of highlight all the positive aspects of one approach and then turning around and highlighting all the negative aspects of a different approach. So one specific example that I recently saw of this was the framing that they used in a documentary called Game Changers about protein and endurance athletes. It kind of appeared that they were suggesting that endurance athletes view protein as a fuel source. So I found this kind of strange because personally, I have never met or even heard of anyone who views protein as a primary fuel source in endurance athletes. Protein is fairly universally seen as a building block or a rebuilding macronutrient. That's not to say that protein should be an afterthought for endurance athletes. In fact, protein is incredibly vital. And if anything, most endurance athletes are probably not getting enough of that. This means that most people are likely to maximize their available tools by including options from both animal and plant sources, with careful attention paid to which of those two types of sources do what better or worse. For me personally, the science is pretty clear that animal proteins outperform plant proteins from a bioavailability standpoint. So I choose to use animal foods as my protein foundation.
This will be the heaviest weight that anyone has ever carried on their shoulders. Patrick will be attempting 555 kilos.
Patrick Baboumian, fake records entirely. He's never been invited to the World's Strongest Man contest. And Patrick Baboumian's best record is Junior Mr. Germany that he won as a fully omnivorous bodybuilder. But look, his Guinness Book of World Records are the most nonsense. He has the record for the front hold, where he holds a 20-kilogram weight. It's called the straight arm hold. But watch the video. Patrick's arms are like this. This is not a straight arm. You can dial 1-800-GUINNESS right now and have the Guinness World Records people come to your house and film you doing whatever stupid record you want to do. And they'll say, here's your certificate. You're a world record holder. You just have to pay them. So Patrick Baboumian gets his world records financed so that he can, oh, I'm going to do some yoke walk at Veg Fest. Or I'm holding the yoke. Look at the actual video. His feats are not impressive. In fact, in his Guinness World Record yoke walk, he sets the yoke down. Disqualification. And he doesn't show you that in the Game Changers. The producers don't show you that. But if you're actually in the audience, people put it up on YouTube. Like, oh, look, Patrick's doing a great job. Oh, he set it down. Oh, he picked it up. The other vegans at Veg Fest outed him for having this double fake record. It's fake that Guinness came out and created a fake record anyway. The real yoke walk is a shorter distance and it is much heavier. It is a weight that Patrick can't even lift, and that's why he doesn't get invited to the Arnold Classic Strongman competition, one of the two premier strongman events. And even though Arnold Schwarzenegger puts on that contest, Patrick's not invited because he would get crushed on his plant-based diet. He's nowhere near the world-class level of the people competing at the Arnold Schwarzenegger Strongman competition. Instead, he's doing these dog and pony show Guinness Book of World Records that aren't real records.
It's interesting with the World's Strongest Man, Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall, and Hafthor Bjornsson all eat 5 to 6 pounds of red meat a day to get where they're at.
Shocking.
The film's disclaimer states that it's not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. So here's my professional medical advice. What all healthier diets have in common is not that they are all low in animal foods. It is that they are all low in processed foods. So, regardless of which dietary pattern you choose, take the junk out, because the whole truth about vegan diets is that simply excluding animal foods comes with clear risks and no proven benefits.
All right, I don't like to use the word literally, but literally everything in this film falls apart when you separate the meat from what else you eat. That's where the problems occur. All the studies showing that meat is bad is because people are eating processed foods and sugars and grains with that meat. If you separate that out, it all falls apart. So they do this entire film making meat look bad when all it is what else you're eating. It's the bad foods. Meat is the one food we've been eating for all of history and is the most healthy for humans and is why we are here. So if there's one message I want you to know, is that it's what else you eat, not the meat. That's where the problems come from. You don't want to get stuck in the middle.
with all the high carb and high fat at the same time. You can go low fat and eat mostly plants, but you need those nutrient-dense animal foods, and you could avoid fat and you could be perfectly healthy. Or you could go on the other side and go high fat and go low carb and avoid processed foods, and you'd be perfectly healthy as well. All the people that have problems are in the middle. They're doing high carb and high fat at the same time, and they're having health issues. So you don't have to be keto, you don't have to be carnivore. You just don't have to avoid all animal foods altogether. That's insane.
G'day everyone, Pete Evans here. So, we want to talk about the Game Changers movie. Well, I'm going to throw a little different spin on it because I think it's fantastic. And the reason I think it's fantastic is because so many people in the paleo, ancestral, keto, carnivore, I guess, movement themselves were once vegan or vegetarian, and we felt great for a little while, but then our health deteriorated, which is why that we've come to this new understanding, and we found paleo, keto, carnivore, low carb, healthy fat, whatever you want to call it, ancestral, primal, and our health improved. So I see it as a great thing because the more people that turn vegan or vegetarian, if they do suffer ill health, then they will keep looking. But the great news is that all of these people will be concerned about the welfare of animals, the welfare of the planet, and also the welfare of the coming generations and themselves. So, you know, they're this close. And some people can actually do really well on a vegan and vegetarian diet. It may not be the best thing for our planet, but I think the majority will find problems for long-term sustainable health if they follow these principles for too long. And when you look at the big picture, 90% of the population, whether it be in America or Australia, it's not really their priority to look after themselves. So I would say let's join forces, the vegans, vegetarians, paleo, carnivore, ancestral, and really try to shape that other 90% and get them to think about where their food comes from, what they're putting into their bodies, how it affects the planet, you name it. That's the biggest, that's the challenge we face. How do we convert or influence those 90% that really need to be educated? So that's my 2 cents worth. I don't think we should be fighting or making fun of each other, because we all want the same thing.
See it all slip as my hands are trying to hold. My dreams, they run deep down a road that I yet to know. Every day, trying to find my way. Every day on my grind, whatever it takes. Hold on to the fire that's deep inside. Let go of the pain, don't try to hide. 'Cause every bruise is proof how far you've come and everything you've done. Be strong, 'cause it's gonna be worth the fight. Trying to stand tall, but I'm caught in this undertow. The waters flood in full of doubt and they overflow. Every day, trying to find my way. Find my way. Every day on my grind, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Hold on to the fire that's deep inside. Cause it's gonna be worth the fight. Worth the fight. You're worth the fight. Worth the fight. Whatever it takes. Hold on to the fire that's deep inside. Hold on. Be strong, cause it's gonna be worth the fight. Tryna stand tall, but I'm caught in this undertow. The waters flood in full of doubt and they overflow. Every day, tryna find my way. Find my way. Every day on my grind, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Hold on to the fire that's deep inside. Cause it's gonna be worth the fight. Worth the fight. You're worth the fight. Worth the fight. Whatever it takes. Hold on to the fire that's deep inside. Hold on, yeah. Let go of the pain, don't try to hide. Won't you let go, don't you let go. Cause every bruise is proof how far you've come and everything you've done. Everything you've done. Be strong, cause it's gonna be worth the